I guess I would like to start now with our introductions. I'm going to start with introducing Ilana Krieger-Lapidus. Ilana was born and raised is a born and raised Calgarian and a proud first-generation Canadian. She is the granddaughter of 4 Holocaust survivors, and her father, of blessed memory, was a child survivor during the war. Ilana has had the honor to serve many organizations in the Jewish community, most notably the CGA Jewish Day School as a Yiddish and preschool teacher, the Calgary JCC as the adult teen director, and she was the principal of Temple's Shabbat School. Her volunteer work includes sitting on the executive of various boards and serving many lunches at the Drop-In Center. For the past 13 years, Ilana has been the Holocaust and Human Rights educator for Calgary Jewish Federation, coordinating and educating tens of thousands of students through school education, survivor visits, commemoration ceremonies, and the Federation flagship program. Our Holocaust Education Symposium and symposium in cooperation with Mount Royal University, which is celebrating its 36th year in spring of 2021. Most recently, Ilana helped institute Canada's first citywide Holocaust Remembrance Day with Calgary City Council. Ilana lives with her husband, David, and has 3 children and a very large dog. Ilana has recently left her position at the Jewish Federation as she is attending rabbinic school with the Jewish Studies Learning Institute out of New York and will become an ordained rabbi in June 2021. That's amazing, Ilana. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, so much. I'm really honored to be here, and I would like to thank all of you for being here too. I know with this pandemic, so many of us are facing our screen all day, and so for you to use your valuable screen time for this is quite an honor, and Marnie and I are grateful. We usually present to students. We do some churches and adult organizations as well, but most of the time we are presenting in front of students. So to do it in front of adults is a real treat. Thank you. The students are also wonderful. Usually by the end, whether they had wanted to be there or not, by the end, they're glad they were. And that's helpful. Sometimes when I'm presenting to students, I want to explain to them that this isn't just a history lesson. For Marnie and I, this is something that is very present in our lives. And for a lot of the Jewish people, that is the case. As recently as just a couple of days ago, there was a synagogue defaced in Alabama with swastikas and words like dirty Jew and holla hoax. So the legacy of the Nazi era and the way that it's come up through time as anti-Semitism is very much with us still. And it's one of the reasons why we do what we do. It's not a glorified history lesson for us. For us, this is our reality. So I wanted to explain to you a little bit about the process of what our survivors went through. You can see beautiful Freda up on the screen. And like Dawn said, our Holocaust Education Symposium has been around for 36 years. And Freda was one of our very first speakers. She was a hero, absolute courage and bravery that you will find during Marnie's presentation, you will agree. But I just wanted to talk about what that was like for our survivors. Most of them during the time that the war started, the ones that survived were in their teens. They were, for the students that we go and talk to, I explain to them, they were probably about their age now, 14, 15, 16, maybe up to 20. There's whole generations of people that didn't survive, people that were considered too old to work or too young to work, that were the first to be murdered by the Nazis. So, very young children and older people in their 40s or up, they didn't make it. And it was these teenagers that had the physical strength to survive what they went through. So you'll hear from Marnie, Freda was young. She was very young. And when the war finally finished, the things that they had seen and the experiences they had gone through are things that we can't even imagine. And when that happened and the war was over, It wasn't like everyone started embracing Jews and anti-Semitism went away. Europe was still a very scary place if you were Jewish. And in fact, there's another member of our community whose father managed to survive through the entire war, through camps and work camps, and came out the other side and ended up in a DP camp, and he was murdered by Nazis there. So getting through the war was no guarantee of survival. But if you did survive, most of the time, the feeling was to get away from Europe as quickly as possible. And so people would work towards getting on a ship and just going to a new world, Australia or the States or Canada. And that was where they ended up. And when they did, they were maybe 19, 20, 21 years old. And they had to start their lives completely over with no family. And at that point, there was no social services. There was no people coming to them and saying, oh, let us help you through the trauma that you've been through. That was not the case. No, everybody had been traumatized. It was World War II. Everyone had lost someone. Everyone had been scarred. And so nobody was rushing to the Holocaust survivors to tell them that there was help for them. So what did they do? Well, they did what they had to do. They took those memories and they locked them in a box in their mind, and they went on with their lives. They got jobs and friends and a home and maybe got married and had children. But all the time they had to keep that box very tightly shut unless they were with people who had been through it too, because otherwise nobody could understand and it was too hard to talk about. So what changed? Why did Freda start speaking? Well, in the 50s and 60s, again, even the 70s, there was not much Holocaust information out there. There were very few TV shows. It wasn't in popular culture. There was very few books, and if there were, they were not accessible. They were very dry and academic. So what happened? Well, one of the things that happened was right here in Alberta, in a small town a couple hours outside of Calgary called Eckville, Alberta. There was a high school teacher who was also the mayor. His name was James Keekstra. And Mr. Keekstra was teaching grade 9 social studies. And one day, one of his students was sitting at his kitchen table writing an essay, and his mom looked over his shoulder and said, "What are you writing?" And he said, "Oh, it's an essay for Mr. Keekstra." And she said, "Oh, what's it about?" And he said, "Well, it's about how the Holocaust never happened and the Jews are trying to take over the world." And his mom said, "Is that what you think?" And he said, "I don't know, but that's what Mr. Keekstra thinks, and I want to get a good mark." Well, to her credit, the mother went to Mr. Keekstra and told him that this wasn't okay, and he blew her off. He thought it was okay. She went to the principal and was blown off again. Mr. Keekstra was a very well-respected teacher and member of the community, and he had a right to teach what he believed. Well, the mother kept on going, thank goodness, and she ended up with the Alberta government. Eventually, Mr. Keekstra was removed from his position as a high school teacher, although he stayed on as mayor. And it was Mr. Keekstra himself who ended up suing the Canadian government because they took away his freedom of speech. What ended up happening in the 80s, though, was that there were Jewish survivors in Calgary who learned that just 2 hours away in this new world where things were supposed to be different, there was a teacher teaching students that what they had gone through didn't happen, that it was a lie, and that they were trying to get sympathy, and they had put the numbers on their arms themselves to get money from the German government. When they heard that there was a teacher, as teachers are very well respected in Judaism, that was spreading these disgusting lies, they just couldn't stand it. And they decided it was time to speak up. So they unlocked that box in their mind and they started to talk. And it was difficult. They had kept it down for so long. But courageously and bravely and slowly, they started to tell their story. And for that, we are incredibly grateful. And to this day, there are survivors that are still doing this, but as you can imagine, they're getting older now, and they're unable to do so anymore. So we have amazing descendants of those survivors like Marnie, who is willing to tell their story for them. And we have people like you who are witnessing her tell that story. And so for you, I say thank you. Once you are a witness, then you know. And we are grateful to you for being here. So I'm going to introduce Marnie. I have had the honor and privilege of working with her to teach literally thousands of students. I am happy to take your questions in the Q&A section, and I will answer them along the way if I can, but mostly they'll probably be saved until the end. Marnie is a very special person, and I know you'll have questions for her as well. So without further ado, Marnie.
Thank you. The first time that my grandmother married my grandfather was during the Second World War, and rooms in the ghetto that she had escaped to were only being rented out to married couples. And so the first time that my grandmother married my grandfather was not for love. The first time my grandmother married my grandfather was in order to secure a place to sleep. By marrying my grandfather, they were able to secure a corner of a room with my grandmother sleeping on one side of a picnic bench, with my grandfather, my Zayda Chaim, sleeping on the other side, and my Uncle Moniak sleeping on top. As Alana mentioned, my name is Marnie Bondar, and I am the granddaughter of 4 Holocaust survivors. It is my honor, but it is also my responsibility to share with you a very small portion of one of my bubby's Holocaust experiences. The word bubby in Jewish means grandmother. My bubby will be also sharing a portion of her story with you in a video she made over 20 years ago for the Shoah Foundation. When you see her in the video, she was 74 years old. My bubby Freda was born in 1922 in Kalisz, Poland, the youngest of 6 kids. With 2 older brothers and 3 older sisters, my bubby Freda was closest with her eldest sister, Sala, or Sally, who by the 1930s already was married and had 2 small children of her own. If you asked my bubby Freda, she would tell you that she grew up in a fairly comfortable home. Her father worked as a tailor and had a number of employees, seamstresses, that worked all over the city for him. And then he would go around, pick up the completed pieces of clothing that they made, and go around Poland selling his wares. My bubby Freda's mother worked as a housewife. My bubby never considered herself to be a religious person. Although the family went to synagogue weekly, they celebrated traditional Jewish holidays and ate traditional Jewish foods. My bubby Freda's parents made the decision to send my bubby to a regular public school as opposed to a Jewish school because they thought it would enhance her opportunities for the future. While my bubby spoke Yiddish at home, Jewish language, Yiddish, she was also fluent in German and Polish. And I think that saved her life many times in the years to come. Even in the years preceding the Second World War, my bubby Freda had very strong recollections of anti-Semitism.
My first day at school, this I remember. From that day on, I remember. was walking to school, and on the way home, the kids gathered together, the non-Jewish kids, and were waiting for me, and was beaten up. And they took my school bag and threw it in the waters, in the river. And I didn't want to go to school. Just my father used to walk me to school and from school for the longest what I can remember.
My Bubby Freda was just 17 years old when Germany invaded Poland at the start of the Second World War, and suddenly huge swaths of Jewish population found themselves under Nazi control. The Nazis aimed to control the Jewish population by forcing Jews to reside in marked sections of cities or towns called ghettos. And ghettos would be enclosed with walls and barbed wire, with the entrances heavily guarded by local police, German police, the SS. Placed under a strict curfew and forced to wear an armband and a Star of David on her chest that identified her as a Jew at all times, my Bubby Freda's life quickly changed.
I used to wear a band, a yellow star in the front, a yellow star on the back, and if we went to work outside the ghetto, we were allowed to walk with the walkway just in the middle of the road. In those days, you didn't have cars, just horses, so that's what you're supposed to walk.
At the outbreak of the war, my Bubby Freda had actually been vacationing with her mom in a small town called Chekochenik. Chekochenik was known for its healing bathwaters, and my Bubby Freda's mom suffered from really bad swelling in her legs. And so my Bubby and her mother had traveled to go enjoy the bathwaters, sort of like how we would go here to Banff to enjoy the hot springs. Suddenly, war breaks out and prohibitions are placed on where and how Jews can travel. Chekochenik is taken over by the Nazis, who want to use the town as a place for their own soldiers, for the Nazis to retreat, to enjoy the life there. And so my Bubby Freda and her mom are forced to leave. But they have nowhere to go and they have no money to get there. And so my Bubby Freda made the decision to lie to local police, pretend she was not Jewish, and travel by herself back to her father in order to secure some money and jewelry for her and her mom to live on. My Bubby Freda was successful with her plan. She was able to make it to her father, and then she traveled back to her mom, and the two lived off of the money and the jewelry that she had taken. After many, many months of separation, a portion of my Bubby Freda's family was able to reunite in a ghetto in the town of Gustinin. While life was incredibly difficult in the ghetto in Gustinin, food was not readily available, jobs weren't available, my Bubby Freda still considered herself to be lucky because at least a portion of her family was together.
My parents didn't want to accept the romance. My sister did accept the romance. She was young, she was intellectual, she was bright. She looked with different glasses the world than my parents. People start coming back from the graves. We used to call them people from the graves. What does it mean, people from the graves? In other little cities, what the destruction started before in Gostinin, the people were taking to graves. They dig their own graves. They were told to take off the clothes. They were shot. And then next day, another group of people came and buried them, cover up the graves.
As more and more stories came into the ghetto about Jews being forced out of the ghetto, and forced to dig their own graves. My Bubby Freda's family began to fear for the day when the same thing would happen to them. My Bubby Freda's parents didn't feel like there was anywhere for them to go, and they couldn't go. By this point, my Bubby's grandparents had found them and were living with them. And so my Bubby's parents stayed despite thinking that they would be killed in the coming days. Two of my Bubby Freda's sisters decided to run away to Russia with their boyfriends. To this day, I have no information about when or how they died. My Bubby Freda's eldest brother Moniak and his best friend Chaim also decided to escape to another ghetto. On the very last night that my Bubby Freda ever spent with her mom, her dad, her grandparents, her sister Sala, and her nieces, was in this ghetto in Gustinin. And on that very last night, my Bubby Freda's father decided to recite the Kaddish. The Kaddish is an ancient, deeply meaningful prayer that is recited by Jews over the dead. When asked why he was reciting the Kaddish, my Bubby Freda's father explained that he didn't think that there would be anyone in the family in the coming days to be able to say it for them.
Then my sister stepped in and said, it's exactly like we were told. We will be taken tomorrow morning and we're going to be shot. And you, my sister, my baby sister, that's how she said to me in Polish. And you're going to run. And one day you're going to live and tell the story. And I said, so where should I go? Who's going to go with me? Who's going to make my breakfast? Where will I sleep? And she said, everything is written up for you. You just, when the right moment comes, you have to go. And I said, I don't want to go alone. I am afraid. If you would come with me, I would feel much stronger. And she said to me, I have 2 children. One day, you're going to be a mother. You will never abandon your children. They come first.
Marnie, we're just getting some comments. If you could speak a little closer to the microphone. Thank you.
And so my Bubby Freda and her sister Sala waited until night fell. And then when they thought it was safe, they made it to the edge of the ghetto, watching and waiting as the guards made their rounds. And when they thought no one was watching, my Bubby Freda's sister Sala lifted up the barbed wire so that my Bubby Freda could dive underneath and run to a nearby forest every second, thinking that she would be struck in the back of the head by a bullet. After years as the baby in the family and being cared for, my Bubby Freda found herself alone in the forest for the first time. And she spent her time in the forest, lonely, tired, hungry, and cold.
This was the second night, and I was really frozen and hungry and disappointed. And I was thinking back, now my mother is maybe doing cooking, or maybe I was planning what things are happening at home when I'm away. And I just decided that I can't take it anymore. I want to die. I just don't want to live anymore. What kind of life is that? I am alone. It was there a broken stone, like a marker. It was a tiny road, and I sat on that stone, and I said to myself, I'm going to sit here till the German people are going to pass with the jeep and see somebody. Then I'm going to say, hi, I'm Jewish, and I want to be dead. I was not lucky enough. They didn't come. Just what happened? If you believe in miracles, you might ask me why I am alive. I'm going to tell you. I think my sister promised me, and my mother too. That was the fate was holding me up.
It was then, as my bubby Freda would say, that a miracle happened. While my bubby Freda sat there on that marker completely covered in snow, she wasn't noticed by ongoing people who were going down the street. But then, just as a farmer was coming by on his wagon, and he didn't see my bubby at first, the wheel on his wagon broke. And when he got down to fix the wagon, he noticed my bubby Freda. He took her in, he fed her, and he gave her directions to another nearby ghetto, this time in the town of Gdansk. My bubby Freda was eventually able to make it to the ghetto in Gdansk, and upon her arrival, she learned to her astonishment that 2 Jewish men had come in the evening before from the ghetto in Gustinin, where she had previously been. To her amazement, she learned that the 2 Jewish men were her older brother Moniek and his best friend Chaim. And so it was here in the ghetto in Gdansk that my bubby Freda married my Zeta Chaim in order to have a place to sleep. They slept on that picnic bench for many, many months. But over time, they noticed that the Nazis would enter the ghetto and a number of Jews would be taken out, never to return. Each time this happened, my bubby and my Zeta and my great uncle would hide, hoping that they wouldn't be taken by the Nazis. Eventually, there was no place left to hide, and all 3 were directed to a train.
It was a cattle train. In every one of the wagons, they pushed in about 200 people.
Was it a closed or open box?
Everything was closed. The doors were shut. 2 little windows on each corner. If you travel with horses, there needs some air. No facilities inside whatsoever. No bathrooms, no water. We were told to take something with us, some water, a sandwich. It's not going to be very long. We were told a nice story. We're going to luxurious places. It was very tight. You had no place to sit. Elbow place. You made yourself elbow place and this was yours. From time to time, my brother and my husband made between them a little place so I can sit down or knee down on that spot. We had no place. You stayed, you were leaning on each other. People were screaming, children were crying, people were hungry, people want to go to the washrooms. And there was no washrooms. It was 3 days. I don't have to tell you what we did and how we did, because you can imagine yourself. They never opened the doors for 3 days.
Who was guarding the car?
Outside the Wehrmacht. The SS pushed us in, they're locked, and the German soldier just they couldn't open up, they wouldn't open up. It took us about 3 days. We didn't know the difference from day and night. You didn't sleep, you were just, people died. In our, it was about 6 or 7 or maybe more people that were pulled out, they were dead. You know, you didn't even have time to cry over dead bodies. Well, I didn't cry, you know, that first of all, from the time I left home, I was a different me. I lost a lot of, I don't know what. Just, I was not me. I just was not me.
Did they move?
I was not nice and gentle. I just didn't know even what it was anymore.
When the cattle train doors opened 3 days later, it was December 1942. My bubby Freda was 20 years old, and she had arrived in Auschwitz, Birkenau. Immediately after getting off the train, men were separated from women, and my bubby Freda found herself alone once again. I think, desperate to be with others, my bubby Freda immediately latched on to a nearby mom and her daughters while waiting in line, waiting to be told whether they would be sent in one direction, told to work, or sent in the other direction and driven to their deaths. It was Joseph Mengele himself who was making the decisions for those in line the day that my bubby Freda arrived in Auschwitz.
When I went up, he stopped me and he said to me, "Wohin gehst du denn? Where are you going?" And I said to him, "I would like to go with them. That's my friend." And he said, "Did I tell you to go?" I said, "No, I didn't ask, can I go with them?" And he said, "No, you cannot go with them. You will go when I tell you to go, and where I tell you to go." To him, it was a principle. To me, it was my life.
The family, the mom and her daughters, were sent in one direction, placed on a truck, and driven to their deaths. My bubby Freda was sent in the other direction, ordered to march for over an hour, and then forced to stop. She was then ordered to strip naked and wait in a room until 20 men and women entered.
We had to sit down and they shaved our heads completely. And we were shaved all over. And then, again came Dr. Mengele. He checked the bodies if anybody has any blemishes or anything what might be a sickness. And everybody who came to that place supposed to be pure. And then we stayed in another line. We were told to pick up our sleeve, and we got a number. This was the number given to me.
What number is that?
27,523. This was given to me on the 18th and the 19th of December 1942 in Birkenau, Auschwitz.
My bubby Freda was also given a bundle of clothing. No bra, no panties, a pair of pants that were way too big, and just one shoe. This was an issue. The winter in Poland is a lot like the winter in Canada. And so my bubby Freda desperately needed to find a second shoe. When my bubby Freda met with some of the prisoners that had been there a little bit longer than she had, she was desperate to learn what had happened to the other prisoners, like the mom and her girls that she had seen being taken away by truck. For some reason in her head, she had it confused and had thought that they had found work by a chimney.
My first question was, where do the people go to work if they go by truck? So she took me to the window and she showed me a chimney. She said, "You see that? That's what they are." Also, I wanted to work so badly there. I always dreamed to work in a bakery. She said to me, "Are you crazy? What kind of bakery? That's not a bakery." And I said, "It has such a big chimney." She said, "That's a crematorium." I said, "Crematorium? Now what's a crematorium?" And then she told us, "You better get used to it. A crematorium is a place where you burn the bodies, the dead bodies. Somebody dies, he goes to the crematorium, it becomes ashes, and that's all."
That first night, my bubby Freda was taken to horse stables in Block 21. 8 girls were pushed into the space where one horse would ordinarily reside. No blankets were ever provided, just straw. They were so cramped for space that if one girl turned in the night, they all had to turn. The only break would come is if someone died and their body would be removed.
Auschwitz-Birkenau was not built. We built. I built. We were building a city. This is how it began, Auschwitz. In the block where I stayed, in the night, they were locking the doors. Nobody could get out. It was a place for about 500 women slept. We got our bread, our rations, our soup, just bottles of water. I didn't see water for 3 months. I didn't know how water looked.
What did you
Till
drink?
today, I don't drink water. Maybe it's. What did I do? We didn't wash. We didn't have nothing to change in. I was busy looking for shoes. Everybody who died, I was trying on their shoes.
My bubby Freda lived minute to minute, surrounded by live electric wire. Many of the prisoners inside Auschwitz chose to end their own lives by going up and touching the live electric wire that surrounded the camp. My bubby Freda thought of suicide many times. But many more times, she thought about her own mother and her sister and came to believe that what they had told her was her truth, that she would be the one to live to tell the story of what had happened to her family.
And days water were overcast. You couldn't breathe because the clouds were very low and the crematoriums were giving up that smoke. It smells exactly like steaks. Just we didn't know. And we get together Sundays. We didn't work Sunday. We used to sit groupings and talk about home. If the parents still alive, we used to talk about that. What did we eat holidays? Chickens and beef and tongue and thinnes and tune and cakes and all those good things what our parents used to do. And now everybody was alone. Nobody had anybody. It was very critical days in Auschwitz. It was very critical. Many times I wanted to go and touch them.
The wire.
Wires.
My bubby Freda spoke and understood many different languages, and this helped with the job assignments that she had while she was in Auschwitz. One of her first jobs was moving dead bodies. She fainted the first time she had to do it, but she was ultimately able to find 2 matching shoes while moving a dead body. For the majority of her time in Auschwitz, my bubby Freda worked in an area called Canada. And in Canada, it was my bubby Freda's job to separate pants from shirts and go through the pockets of all of the clothing, turning over anything of value that she found to the Nazis to further the Nazis' war efforts. Oftentimes, when my bubby Freda would go through the clothing, the pockets of the clothing, she would find food, and she was able to keep herself alive on the food that she took from the pockets of the clothing that she went through. My bubby Freda considered it a very lucrative position in Auschwitz.
Sometimes my husband used to come to see me. He got himself, like when asking for plumbers, he picked his hand up and said, I'm a professional. He came in with the professionals. His job was running to find me, on what block I was. And we chat and talk to each other. Sometimes my brother came in and we just give each other courage and look, a war is not forever. One day it's going to be finished. And it's going to be over. Maybe we're going to make it. We have bad days and good days. It was days I had typhus. I had no medication. I was lying in that hospital, Revere. That was for people, sickness. And nobody comes back from that place. Just I did came back.
By December 1944, my bubby Freda had been in Auschwitz for 2 years. By December 1944, it was clear that the Germans were losing the war, and bombs started dropping outside concentration camp. In an effort to try, one last-ditch effort to try to help win the war, the Nazis decided to move prisoners out of concentration camps to be used as forced laborers in other parts of Poland. And so, in the dead of winter, with no adequate food, clothing, rest, thousands upon thousands of prisoners were marched out of Auschwitz. Those who could not keep up with the pace of the march were shot.
One day, we were told, the girls get in front of the gates, we're walking. We used to call it the Dead March. We walked for 3 days, and walking, on the second day, we were about 10,000. So we walked. I looked around. I didn't see too many German soldiers, and whoever was beside me were old people. So I thought to myself, the next chance I get, out I go. And that's what I did. We were walking with it very slow. Whoever was left in the back, the dog finished the jobs. The dogs were trained. If you pointed out the finger at somebody and said, Jew, he jumped, he tear you to pieces. So nobody wanted to be in the back, and this made us go faster. Well, I was up front, kind of. Just the first situation when I figured out it's good to run was when the 2 or 3 guys, the German, got close to each other and started chatting and smoking a cigarette and having a drink because it was very cold. And it was a lots of snow on the road. And in the both sides you got deep, how you call that, like a rov, you know? And I jumped in it like graves. I jumped in it, and another few girls jumped. And they didn't see. And if they see, they didn't want to see. They were glad that you were less and less.
Had my bubby Freda remained with the other women that she jumped into the ditch with, she likely would have been liberated in the coming days or weeks. Instead, my bubby Freda made a costly mistake. After jumping into the ditch with the women, she and the other women made it to a nearby farm and were fed. And while there, they learned that the male prisoners from Auschwitz were being marched a few days after the women. And so my bubby Freda thought she would be the hero of the family, and she would go back and jump into the men's march, find my Zeta, find my Uncle Moniek, show them how it's done, and help them escape the march. The first part of my bubby Freda's plan actually worked. She was able to jump into the men's march without being detected. However, the men's march was far more heavily guarded, and my bubby Freda was soon found out as being a woman. She was separated again from the men, and she was used as a forced laborer for an additional 5 months. My bubby Freda was 23 years old when she was finally liberated.
This was the 5th of May, 1945. And I am alive. And my husband found me 2 weeks after the liberation. He walked from camp to see if somebody told him that I was alive. And he found me sitting and crying, how come I survived? It was, how come nobody else survived from my family? My parents, why was I picked?
After the war, my bubby Freda learned that all 3 of her sisters had been murdered. Sala murdered, Sala's daughters murdered, my bubby Freda's grandparents murdered, all remaining nieces, nephews, cousins murdered. The only remaining survivors from my bubby Freda's family were my bubby Freda and her 2 brothers, Moniek and Israel. My father, Sam, was born in a displaced persons camp in Italy in 1947. And it was here in Italy that my grandparents were required to get married for a second time, as they had no documentation proving that they'd ever been married that first time in the ghetto in Gdansk, where they had married to secure a portion of a room. The need to be able to feel safe as a practicing Jew and walk around without fear led my grandparents to ultimately move to Israel. And it was here in Israel, this time now with my father, Sam, and a younger brother, Ron, in tow, that my grandparents were required to marry a third time in order to satisfy rabbinical authorities that their marriage was truly legitimate. In 1960, my grandparents made the decision to move to Canada. When my buddy Freda learned that there was an actual country called Canada, she knew that it was the place that she needed to move to. In Auschwitz, she had always associated the word Canada with wealth and abundance. It had been the place where she could always find food. My bubby Freda would want me to tell you that she never regretted her decision to move here. Her two older brothers remained in Israel and had families and kids. And today, my bubby Freda's legacy continues. I am one of my bubby's 5 grandchildren, and she has 4 great grandchildren. And that is a very, very small portion of my bubby Freda's Holocaust testimony. But Dawn, keep going through the pictures. That's a great one of my grandparents with my dad, Sam. Let's just keep going through these photos here for a sec. That's my very, very handsome Zeta. Dawn, if you don't mind stopping on this photo. So that's my bubby Freda in the middle with her oldest brother Monique on the right and her youngest brother Israel on the left. One of the things that I talk about a lot when I talk to the students doing this presentation is just how much testimony there is and just how little of it I get to share with all of you. My bubby Freda's actual testimony that she made for the Shoah Foundation runs about 3.5 hours in length. Today, you saw about 15 minutes of it. The other crazy part of this whole thing is all the amazing, heroic, insane stories that happened to other family members, like my Uncle Monique and my Uncle Israel. I'll share a small one with you now. When my Uncle Israel arrived in Auschwitz, he was left on the ground for dead. Nobody knew he was alive, but someone thought that they recognized him and ran and told my Uncle Monique. My Uncle Monique went and found my Uncle Israel, picked him up and carried him and hid him under his bunk for months, sharing his very meager rations with him. Okay, Dawn, next photo, please. Thanks. Thanks. So I've made it pretty well through this presentation, but there are some hard things that I need to share. My bubby died 3 months ago. It's pretty new for me, hence the tears. Sorry, guys. Anyway, this is a photo of my bubby Freda's father, Sam, who my dad is named after. It is one of only 2 photos that we have that predate the war. My bubby Freda was definitely someone who lived without regret. But one of the things that she did regret is that she couldn't remember what her mother looked like. And we never had any photos to show her. Next photo, thanks, Dawn. And this one is the second photo that my family has that predate the war. This is my Bubby Freda's eldest sister, Sala, the one who held up the barbed wire for her so that she could dive underneath. And that was the last time she saw her sister, Sala. And this is a picture of her sister and her husband taken at their engagement. It was taken in my Bubby Freda's parents' home. Next photo. And this just proves how old this video is, because that's me in the middle. My Bubby Freda took this video in 1996, and she died in January of this year at the age of 97. Next photo. I took this one. I think she's pretty cute. And there she is with 3 of her great-grandchildren. And that is a little bit of my Bubby Freda's Holocaust experience. Thank you very much for listening. And both Alana and I would be happy to take any questions that you have at this time.
Alana,
Marnie, Paul would like to tell you that was an amazing story. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
And thank you from Carrie. Paul, I just wanted to address, you said, you mentioned locked away memories as everyone at the time had experienced various degrees of trauma, much like thousands of returning World War I and World War II soldiers with PTSD. Absolutely. I hope that I acknowledge that, and if I didn't, I apologize. World War II and the First World War, of course, were traumatic and scarring for so many, and I hope you understand that it wasn't just the Holocaust survivors that suffered. It was just they suffered in a different way. Everyone's thanking you, Marnie, for your amazing story.
Oh, thank you. I consider it quite an honor to be able to share my Bubby Freda's story. My Bubby, as Alana mentioned at the beginning, my Bubby Freda shared her Holocaust testimony with thousands of students for years and years. And so I consider it a big responsibility, but also an honor to be able to share her experience. Yeah. And this was my first time ever doing it like this. So thank you.
To say that, you know, I have seen your presentation before, and it's just as touching in this circumstance as it was live. So thank you very much for your presentation, Marnie. I guess if people want more information or to hear more stories, or I don't know, just want to understand a little bit more, where can you direct them? Where can they get this information? What can they do?
The Calgary Jewish Federation website, which is just Calgary, you can Google Calgary Jewish Federation, is a font of information about Holocaust education. If you look under programming and Holocaust education, the Shoah Foundation, which is Steven Spielberg's baby that he made in the 90s, has literally hundreds of thousands of hours of video testimony, including Freda's, including my grandmother's, and it's illuminating, as I'm sure you can imagine. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington has a fantastic site that has a great video called, and of course my mind is blank, The Pursuit of Nazi Power, and it's free to stream, ushmm.com. And it also teaches you the history from, you know, before the war in the 30s all the way up through the end. And it's an excellent resource. So I hope that helps.
That's what it does. As well, you mentioned that you guys do these presentations for students in schools. And I don't know if it was said, but you guys do that for free, right? This is funded by the Jewish Federation. How is that funded, I guess is the question.
Well, from generous donations from viewers like you. Thank you. Basically, we have our United Jewish Appeal Fund, which is sort of like the United Way. And Jewish community members donate generously to that fund, and for that reason, we get to create projects like this. As I don't know if you noticed, but the Alberta Human Rights Commission also helped fund the creation of this presentation and 4 others, so that the onus on our Holocaust survivors wasn't as heavy, and their descendants could tell their story instead, like brave Marnie.
As well, I also wanted to mention that, just so for people's edification, that we are recording this session. This session has been recorded. We will be posting it on the Adria website as well for viewing. As well, the other stories that you said through the Shoah Foundation, but the Jewish Federation also has these stories as well, right? That people can access. Is that correct?
They can't access these presentations because, of course, we have the video testimony, but we don't have the presenter. So those are only live. But for example, someone asked if Freda's story is available, all 3.5 hours of it. And yes, through the Shoah Foundation, it is. And Marnie, there are some questions for you, actually.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind scrolling for me and letting me know what they are. In the meantime, while you're looking, I did notice that Justice Moen is one of the people who did write something. And Justice Moen, it's me, Marnie Plucer. You admitted me to the bar many, many, many years ago. This is what I'm doing with my life now. I hope you're well.
Okay, Marnie, Jeannie wants to know, did your grandmother ever say what kept her going and why she didn't give up?
Yeah. So she did. She talked a lot about the fact that she really truly believed that what her mom and her sister had told her would be the truth, that she would be the one in her family to live. She believed that wholeheartedly. And I think it kept her going many times. Yeah. It was also her spirit. My bubby, Freda, very much had a very, she had a survivor spirit. You know, I'm the granddaughter of 4 Holocaust survivors. And sometimes one of the reasons why I chose to share this bubby, this grandmother's story, is exactly for that reason, for her survival spirit. And her willingness to look at life and say, okay, I'm going to make the most of it and make every day count, no matter what the circumstance. That's fairly atypical of a survivor experience. Mm-hmm. Most survivors came out of the war and kind of wanted to lead a more quiet, don't make waves existence. Didn't want to rock the boat, didn't want to draw attention to themselves. That was very much the opposite of this bubby. This bubby did whatever it took to stay alive, but to also to thrive. And that's quite unique.
Marnie, Stan would like to know, how does this trauma show up and color your life today?
Thanks. So I'm pretty sure my dad and mom and my sister are watching. So they're probably laughing along right now. I think the biggest way, and Alana and I talk about this because Alana has a similar experience, is, well, first of all, where are my relatives? There's so many of us walking around that don't have relatives. My dad grew up without grandparents or very many aunts or uncles or cousins. Everyone had been murdered. And so that's a loss, a huge loss that can't be fixed. There are lots of other little ways. Alana, I'd love for you to answer this question after I'm done, because I know you have some unique experiences as well. My other set of grandparents, of course, had a very unique relationship with food. We didn't let anything go to waste. Those sorts of things. In terms of my own feelings of how I think the Holocaust has shaped my upbringing, it's of critical importance to me that my children know where they come from, that they take pride in being Jewish, that they are respectful of other religions and cultures, and recognizing the value in that we all come from different places, and every different place has value and is worthy of being shared.
And for me, yeah, I mean, being the child or grandchild of survivors is not easy, as I'm sure you can all imagine. My mother, Oliva Shalom, used to hide bowls, like empty margarine containers of coins all around the house in case she needed money quickly. And, you know, and me, when I was a kid, I had heard all these stories about gas chambers and showers. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I was able to have a shower with the bathroom door completely closed, because I was always worried that gas would come out of it. It's things that you don't really think about. It's a way of being untrusting and always kind of having your bag packed in case you need to get up and go. And I'm hoping, and I know Marnie is like this too, that as much as we want our children to know about the experience, we also want to water down the trauma and the neuroses that is coming down through the generations, because that's a hard, difficult way to live, and we don't want that for our children. Marnie, so Michelle wants to know, do you find that the students you speak to are familiar with the war and the situation in Auschwitz?
Yeah, great question. I have to really commend the teachers. When we go into schools, for the vast majority, the kids are very well prepared. Holocaust education isn't like a very specific unit that's just placed into our curriculum here in Alberta, and Alana can speak more to that.
I will.
My experience is when I go in is I'm amazed that these teachers have taken the time to find our resources, which they can get through Calgary Jewish Federation. And most of the time the kids have read a novel. They've done a novel study. So not only do they know about the Holocaust and Auschwitz, but it also amazes me how they're able to take the experience and apply it to today, and are able to articulate to us why they think learning about the Holocaust is so relevant today.
And Marnie knows that this is one of my rants, and I won't subject you to the whole thing. But Holocaust education is not in the Alberta curriculum at this time. There's a unit in grade 8 on citizenship and in grade 11 on nationalism, but it is up to the individual teacher entirely to decide whether or how much time to dedicate to the Nazis and to the Holocaust. And that puts a lot of onus on teachers that maybe isn't fair. And what we're really trying to do is to get Holocaust education placed properly into the curriculum. So yeah, call your MLA, folks. Not right now, but one day when this is over, we would love that support, because as much as the work that Marnie and I do and the Federation does, you know, we can only hit these small populations at a time. Even our largest education symposium is 3,500 students once a year, but still not everybody's getting it. So that's we're on a quest for that. Marnie, Darcy says, Darfur and Rwanda in the 90s, the common threat to much of this appears to be the human propensity to separate us and them, and the fact that when we do that, we can more easily ignore or dismiss the murders as happening to someone else. So my question is, what more do we need in addition to remembering to do to prevent these human atrocities and genocides in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think that that's sometimes where we leave our students, because it can be overwhelming for them, because unfortunately, you're very right. History repeats itself over and over again. I remember when I started in Holocaust education, one of the taglines that we used was never again. And that became so irrelevant so quickly, because unfortunately it has happened again and again. And so when we talk to students, we actually leave on a fairly good note with a lot of hope. Our students are wise, and they recognize that we don't need to solve all the problems of planet Earth all in one day, but there are things that we can each do on a very individual level that can help us. And it comes down to, how do we treat people? How do we treat people in our schools, in our workplace? How do we engage? How are we showing interest in other people's lives and experiences, and recognizing that there's a heck of a lot of hurt people walking around and that are worthy of being listened to. And then we talk to our students about when you see something wrong and it doesn't feel right, being brave enough to stand up and say something. Yeah.
And yeah, that's lovely, Marnie. That's really good. And also, one of the, I mean, you can look this up and I don't have it at my fingertips, but there are basically 7 signs of when a genocide is happening. And like you said, Darcy, one of the signs is when you dehumanize the population that you're targeting. So for example, in Rwanda, they were called cockroaches. During the Holocaust, they were called rats or vermin. If you can take the humanity from the people that you are targeting and look at them as like a disease or something dangerous that isn't even human anymore, then they're a lot easier to kill. So our goal when we do these talks with students is, we talk about, well, how do you treat each other? And are you, the Holocaust and bullying are not the same thing. But if you follow bullying to its very, very farthest extreme, there's not that much daylight between them. So we talk to students about that, about just how we treat each other.
So that points to a question that I have for you, Marnie. You're a granddaughter, you're a daughter, you're a mother, you're a wife, you're a sister, you're a good friend, you're a lawyer. But it's from the angle of, specifically in this scenario, as a mediator. With the training that we receive in mediation, with what Alana said, it's through that lens, I guess, I want you to why is this important right now in this climate?
Yeah, I think there's so much that we can impact there. So, and that's actually my other claim to fame. I did practice law for a long time, but I also worked as a mediator for many, many years. And I think about it lots, but I think it goes down to what the real basics of mediation, and being able to sit and listen and truly listen and hear where people are coming from and have a better sense of exactly that experience. Again, I think there's so many people walking around nowadays that are hurt, the walking wounded, and we all look normal and we all look the same and we all look okay, and yet there's something there. And so being able to dig deeper and ask the questions and really humanize people and humanize experiences and let people see each other, truly see each other. And, in the best world, isn't that what mediation's supposed to do?
One of the things our survivors always say at the end of their presentations is, it's not about the color of your skin, it's not about your religion. We are all people and we are all human and we all deserve to be treated that way. And that's always their final message. For them, they always say that if they weren't the ones that had experienced the Holocaust, they wouldn't have believed it either. It's just incomprehensible to all of us to think that people treat other people this way. And someone, I'm sorry, I don't see who right now, but was asking about modern day anti-Semitism and if we're seeing an uptick in it the way that it looks on the media. And, I'm sure Marnie and Don will agree, yes, we are. We're seeing it even in schools and some of the junior highs that we go to. The catalyst for a teacher calling us to come is because there's been an anti-Semitic event in the school. Somebody has a swastika painted on their locker, or someone is told that they need to go to a gas chamber. Just awful, awful stuff. Obviously, someone who's 12 or 13 or 14 doesn't know what they're talking about, but they know that it's shocking and scary, and they're sort of pushing buttons to see what takes. That doesn't explain other anti-Semitism, like the shootings in synagogues, or, just like I said a couple of days ago, with the vandalism on a synagogue on Passover, one of our holiest days of the year. It's just incomprehensible. And all we can do is just keep giving the message, be kind. Marnie, do you want to comment to that?
Ditto. That's how I feel. Yeah, anti-Semitism definitely is on the rise. Everywhere. I feel it everywhere. I think the one this week that stuck out for me was that Jews were responsible for COVID. You name it, communism, capitalism, you name it. Jews are somehow always blamed. Take the higher road. And I think the response is to always respond in kindness and willingness to learn. Most times I find it comes from ignorance. And the way to combat that is teaching. And so that's what we try to do. And that's what we ask all of you to do. I hope that in sharing my Bubby Freda's story today, that the takeaway is that you now know more. You've learned now, and you can speak to this. And so when you are confronted with, be it anti-Semitism or another form of racism, you will be in a position to say, hey, I know better. I heard something about this. Let me share what I know.
Marnie, Paul would like to know what your Bubby thought about movies like Life is Beautiful or Schindler's List. It's a difficult combination to Hollywoodize something so traumatic. Do you think it waters down the trauma?
Yeah. So this is another conversation that Alana and I have had for hours on end. There are some movies out there that do a very good job. My Bubby wasn't really into watching movies, although there's a show on TV now called Stitzel. She used to like that one. She didn't really watch Holocaust movies, or I don't remember her doing so. In terms of my own experience, there are a few that I think do a very good job. Schindler's List, I think, is a good one. There's other movies or books that I don't think necessarily give a true picture. I always defer to Alana to be more politically correct than I on these topics. And she is always generous in providing anyone who asks with a list of both movies and books that we really can get behind and support.
That was very diplomatic, Marnie. No, Marnie expressed we have some pointed opinions on the subject, but at the very base of it, I'm just glad that people are learning about it. And if it turns out that the trauma is watered down or there's some inaccuracies, like in Life is Beautiful, that's, you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. At least people are learning about it. At least they have some sort of context, and maybe all of the actual tiny details that are maybe not true are sort of beside the point of at least having some of that knowledge. One of the portals that teachers have to us is they read a story called The Boy in the Striped Pajamas with their students in grade 6 to 9, for example. That story also is wildly inaccurate in lots of ways. Does that mean that we're going to turn away those students and not teach them about the Holocaust, or disparage the teacher for teaching a book that is not right in some of its details? No. We're just grateful that the teacher has chosen that book to do, because she didn't have to, or he didn't have to. And we go in and we tell our story. So you kind of have to, not cut off our nose to spite our face, and just go meet people where they are. And we're happy to do that, because that's just what needs to happen right now.
And to that point as well, and I've been to a couple of Holocaust museums, Yad Vashem being one of them, and it's so impactful to experience one of those. That's something to consider if you're ever in a city that has one, to really understand. It's a different level of understanding than a movie or a book could provide. So that's something else to consider.
Yeah, absolutely.
Darcy has mentioned some other genocides, and Darcy, if you don't mind, I'm going to speak with you offline because yes, I would like to talk to you about this. It's very interesting. Does anyone else have any questions for Marnie? Marnie, Sharon says that her mom was present when her father was taken away by Nazi soldiers when Germany occupied the Netherlands. He survived, but the years he was missing impacted my mom and Oma, and I still decades later feel and see the impact of intergenerational trauma in my own life. I applaud you both for sharing these stories and reminding us of the courage and strength of our ancestors while also ensuring we never forget. That was beautiful, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A little hug.
Andrea says, thanks, Marnie. Your presentation actually made me cry. I'm so glad that someone is doing something so valuable for our society to bring to us and remind us that we must always be vigilant.
Thanks. Thanks, Justice Mullen.
As well, also just for those who are interested before, because I see the numbers dwindling a little bit, please answer the poll questions. We have the participant survey right now in progress. Your feedback, as always, is extremely important to Adria, so we very much appreciate all your feedback. And if you do have more comments, concerns, obviously you can reach Alana and Marnie and the Jewish Federation to ask a lot of these questions that we may not get time to, or you may not have thought of to ask at this point in time. And obviously for Adria, we can also facilitate any more questions if you want to email us at info@adralberta.com. But where can they reach you, Ilana, or to discover more information specifically?
I'm actually a volunteer at this stage. So Dawn, if you don't mind, can you be our conduit if someone would like to speak to me about this, that you can contact me and I will get a hold of them?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So again, we will do that through info@adralberta.com. Sorry, please continue. I just wanted to be sure to get the poll out.
Yes. Jeannie, in your opinion, what can people do to prevent this from ever happening again? What do you think, Marnie?
You know, the truth is I wasn't supposed to be here today. Today I was supposed to be in Poland. And I was supposed to be chaperoning a bunch of our high school youth on a trip called March of the Living, where we take Jewish youth to visit a number of the concentration camps in Poland. And after a week there, then we go for another week in Israel to celebrate all the awesomeness about being able to just be Jewish and be free to celebrate and feel free to do so. And so on a personal level, it's experiences like that. I think it's important that we share both the negatives and the history of what's happened, but also really enjoy and take the time to learn about other people's religions and cultures and enjoy it and share it and experience it. That's where my head's at right now, Alana. I don't know, where's yours?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if we knew how to make this never happen again, there wouldn't have been any genocides after the Holocaust. So I wish I had, it's sort of the $64,000 question. I feel like all we can do is spread the message, be good people, teach our children, reach out to our government. When we see injustice, try and correct it. When we see immigrants being treated poorly, try and help them. I mean, this has to be a groundswell. Hitler did not do the Holocaust by himself. If he hadn't had the support of thousands and thousands of Nazis behind him, the Holocaust wouldn't have happened. So when you see a leader being unjust or unkind or targeting people, you have to speak up. One of the things that we talk to our students about is not being a bystander. And when you're a kid in junior high or high school, not being a bystander, that's going to cost you. It's going to cost you. And we ask them to please pay the price anyway. So for you as adults, same thing. Sometimes to speak up or to step in or to stand up, it might cost you. It might cost you a lot. And, you know, we ask that you do it anyway. It's tough.
Wow. As always, thank you very much to both of you for taking the time to do this, and for everybody who participated and attended.